Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hacking with Friends. Today, I have my co-host from the Null Byte show on today. My name is Kody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and this is Nick. Nick, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Nick. I've been on the live stream once before now, but I'm a regular host in Cyber Weapons Lab, and I'm an engineering student at UCLA.
Cool. So, all right, today we're going to talk about privacy. And a big part of the hacker community is concerned with privacy because it kind of ties into all this other stuff. A lot of the time when you hear about breaches, it's of people's personal data. So a lot of that stuff can be used maliciously if hackers get access to it. And for people that are paranoid about privacy or are just concerned about it, we often get questions about, what to do in order to be more secure. And some of the stuff also translates over to people like journalists who might be maybe a little unsure about a piece of hardware they were separated from, or maybe they just want to make sure that the operating system they're working on isn't going to leave any traces when they go to a website for something they're researching. Now, there's a lot of different ways people can get breached. And one of them might be, if you're investigating a certain business and your IP address is leaking that one unique machine at this news agency keeps going to your website over and over, then that could be a big red flag for anybody who's actually looking for this sort of stuff. But if you want to leave a low profile, and even for normal people, be able to control the amount of information that's being put out there, then there are some great options that go a little bit beyond the standard of advice of just, get a VPN and try to minimize the tracking that you are falling subject to. Now, Nick, if you are going to recommend something for people who are serious about privacy, what kind of common sense steps would you recommend they take in order to prevent them from being tracked or having their data being breached?
Yeah, like obviously what you said, I would have a VPN and a VPN service that you can trust, obviously, because they're going to be able to see all the traffic if they want to. So a VPN service you can trust is very good. And then frequently changing your exit node on the VPN is important. And then using, if you are using a normal operating system like Windows or Mac OS, then it always helps to have browser extensions like uBlock Origin and Privacy Badger on your web browser to block any tracking links.
I go a step further. I have no script, and that can be a hassle because it literally just blocks JavaScript from running. But it really makes you realize how many of these websites are running really powerful code that can interact a lot with your operating system, and you might not totally understand all the stuff that this code is doing until you see how ubiquitous it is and where it's running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another thing I did is I have a Pi-hole set up in my house right now. And I'm just block any domain that has a Facebook in it just automatically gets blocked. So that means I can't go to Facebook for one, but any Facebook ad domains that are trying to get data from me get automatically blocked. So that's just
Instagram and some other stuff too, probably.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so it's really hard trying to minimize the amount of information that's being leaked about you out there because these tech companies are ravenous when it comes to soaking all of it up and using it to build a profile on you. And this isn't just tech companies like, Facebook. This is also stuff like your internet service provider who's happy to, store this data and offer it up to different people. So there's all sorts of threat models we're talking about today. Everything from someone who maybe is just concerned about the amount of data that they're leaking when they're doing certain research or looking into certain things versus, maybe someone who has a demanding job that requires them to be completely confidential and they don't want to be leaking information when they're doing an investigation or something like that. So lots of different people that can benefit from this sort of data hygiene. And I think it's really interesting to look at the concept of virtualization, custom operating systems, or taking it a step further than using kind of one computer to do all of your stuff. Because, that's great. But if you get breached on your main computer, if you're using it all the time, the attack surface is much larger than a one-time operating system that you spin up specifically to do one thing that doesn't leave as much of a trail for all the kinds of trackers you're going to find out there on the internet, or even the kind of tracking that your internet service provider does just as a matter of business.
Yeah, just like you don't want all your eggs in one basket, you don't want to do all your internet trafficking from the same device. So being able to spread it out either virtually or actually having multiple devices can always help.
Cool. So for somebody who's considering, trying out maybe a more I guess we'll call it hardened for privacy Linux system, what would you recommend when it comes to virtualization versus using something like a USB drive versus just doing it on the actual, hardware itself and just making a new partition on the operating system?
Mm-hmm. Well, so everything in life is always a trade-off, right? And if you're going for maximum security, if that's your number one focus, then booting off the USB, without a doubt, is the best way to run the operating system we're going to be talking about today, Tails OS. That's because if you run Tails OS from a bootable USB, it never ever touches the system's hard memory for functions of the computer. and it saves a small amount of data persistently on the USB drive, which is your own device. But that is not always like a feasible option because running off a USB can be slow. The space is limited. So if you need to, running off a virtual machine or creating your own partition is sacrificing some privacy in order for some more usability. So you gotta weigh the pros and cons for what you're trying to accomplish.
Or potential disadvantage is just having the issue of, if you've got this ultra secure operating system running on the same hard disk as you have a maybe potentially infected like Windows operating system, Windows can see into that drive and vice versa. So, unless you have something specifically set up to separate it, a virtual machine, you can fire it up, you can delete it, you can store it, you can clone it. It's much more kind of durable than like something that you're doing on your hard drive. So a lot of the time I tell people when they're getting started with Linux that you should run it on your hard drive as a separate partition because it's much more stable. But this is one of those times where I'm actually going to give the opposite advice, where I agree with Nick. If you really want to be more secure with this, you're not going to be moving around very much, because if you bump that USB drive, then suddenly your operating system takes a pause and nothing works. But aside from that vulnerability of just not being able to move it very well, there is the added benefit of a lot of privacy, the ability to spin up an operating system and just destroy it without really needing to worry about leaving traces behind or sharing space with an operating system that might be compromised.
Yeah, and like the number one use case, that I see for like having a USB on the go is if I was traveling to a country where I really didn't trust the government, and especially at a job like if I was a government official or if I was a journalist, I wouldn't want to bring my data driver computer like through that country's security, and I wouldn't want any government agents to be able to see that. So if I had a USB device, they're not going to be able to find anything sensitive. And when I'm traveling in that country, I would still be able to have a secure operating system that I could use to get some stuff done.
Yeah, and that's a very common use case. Maybe you want to do something in a country where you suspect that internet usage is being monitored, or you're a journalist, like you said, and you're trying to research something that, if it were to leak out, could get you in trouble or make it so you can't continue your work. So this is a privacy tool that's used by a lot of different people, and I think it's really cool to consider, like, beyond just the standard suggestions for privacy, what people who are really serious about this know. About what to do when you want to try to evade tracking. And we're today, and if you want to check it out, we're going to be putting a tracking link out there. And it'll be interesting to see the kind of stuff that happens when people click on it. Generally, there's a lot of tracking that happens every time you interact with the internet. So that's not just your internet service provider making note of all the websites you go to. It's also every website you go to making note of you, every single detail they can possibly pull down, from the size of your screen to your GPU. It's really impressive what a particular website can pull from your computer, provided that JavaScript is enabled and you click on a link. So, while a lot of people think that the danger starts with, downloading a malicious file, sometimes by clicking up on a link, you can actually give away enough information that it's pretty concerning as well. In fact, I think one of the tracking tools that I've used also can tell if you're sitting down or standing up when you go to the website, which is like a pretty weird thing to think about, that like a website is aware of if you're like lying down or standing up or like whatever. So that's it's pretty cool that you can learn that much information. But if you're a privacy.
Yeah, exactly. And this is just like, this Tails OS is probably like one of the most, I guess, the most extreme measures you can take to protect your privacy. So like we're going to go over, there's some trade-offs, but it's a very secure way to browse the internet.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and go over to your screen and start checking it out.
Okay. So here I'm just at the Tails homepage. You can get here just by searching Tails OS into your search engine of choice. And then the people who put this together did a really good job of making it simple to download, simple to install, no matter how you're going to install it. So we're just going to go really quickly on how you can actually get Tails. So from the main page, you can go to this installation page, and this is where you're operating Tails from. And there's really detailed documentation about how to download Tails and how to verify the PGP key to make sure that you're getting a legitimate version of Tails and not some malware.
Okay, why is that a concern for people? Like, can you walk maybe beginners through why Tails might be a big fat target for people who are trying to do a malicious kind of switcheroo?
Exactly, because the people who are most interested in protecting their privacy have the most to lose by their privacy being sacrificed. So it's a big target because the people using this are journalists researching very, very sketchy stuff, government officials who really want to protect all the information that they're sending out from their computer. And so a hacker being able to get them a malicious version of Tails, which looks and appears like Tails, but actually is leaking some data to these like some different third party, is like what you said, it's a very big target. So verifying the PGP key of Tails OS is definitely a step I'd take, especially if you know you're like a high profile target.
Right. So, there are attacks where, let's say that I knew that somebody was going to download Tails OS and I had access, I broke into their network. There might be a way that I would DNS, downloads a different version of Tails. And if I were to then go, let's say, on my cell phone and outside of that network, go to the Tails website and notice that the key is wrong or the hash is wrong for the download I just downloaded, or I get a different version of the website or something like that, that would be a sign that either someone on your local network is messing with you, or you might be the victim of a watering hole attack. And in some cases, the supply chain of the software gets compromised at the very start. And a website will be taken over, or their download server will be taken over, a file will be swapped, and they rely on the fact that people, even though they know that they're supposed to, don't check the key before installing a critical piece of software. In this case, a privacy-focused operating system that's supposed to protect you from surveillance.
Like I was saying, so I'm on Windows, so I just click Windows and install from Windows, and there's very, very detailed information about how to install it, which is really nice because like a lot of, especially like niche Linux distributions, don't have the most detailed documentation. But the team behind Tails did a really nice job about using their operating system very transparent and very easy. But today we're just going to expedite it because we're doing a live stream. We're just going to do a direct download. Normally, if you're installing it on a USB stick, as I recommend, you'll just click this link and you'll download the .img file. But in case you want to run it on a virtual machine or your own partition, then you'd have to download the .aso file. And so you just click this link down here and download Tails 4.11 or whatever version it is.
This image, and you're just going to use it in whatever virtualization software you happen to have, probably like VirtualBox or something, or Parallels if they ever get a student edition that's free. Yeah,
I'm just using Oracle VirtualBox because it's free and it works good enough. But if you are running Tails OS, then you are going to have to make sure that you trust the security of the host operating system. In my case, this is my version of Windows 10, which I've done some security auditing on, so I can trust it. And you're going to want to make sure you actually trust the virtualization hardware. So you have to make sure that you can trust Oracle VirtualBox and your version of VirtualBox. So you're going to want to probably verify the PGP key on VirtualBox as well. That's just if you want to take every measure possible. Yeah.
That's a great point and an example of an even bigger watering hole attack. If you could compromise a bunch of versions of VirtualBox, then even if the actual operating system was secure that you loaded in it, someone could still attack the system. So it's really important to make sure that any privacy-focused software you are downloading, you make sure that it has not been modified from the original version that was put out by the authors.
Yeah, and so I already have it installed and I have it running in VirtualBox already. Oops. Go ahead and close that. So I have it installed on VirtualBox, but that's like I do recommend installing it on a USB drive, but for the sake of recording this live stream, I am running it on the virtual machine. There we go. And so another cool feature about Tails is after every use, any local data is automatically deleted. Like I said before, assuming you're running it from a USB, it's never going to touch the system's hard disk or hard drive. So there's not going to be any trace of Tails OS being used on that computer.
Oh, cool. Okay, so it doesn't like leave a big fat stamp that like someone was running some like weird privacy OS.
Exactly, and that's even if you're in a country where the government doesn't want you using software like this, that's another protection against that because there's no way of knowing that you even use something like Tails OS because it uses the system's RAM for all its local memory usage. And so I'm just going ahead and get started with Tails. It's going to be a similar USB, and I'm going to just give that a second.
Cool. So is Tails derived off of another type of Linux, or is it its own branch?
So if you've used Ubuntu, it'll be very comfortable because it uses the GNOME desktop manager. So everything feels like very Ubuntu-like and very like Kali Linux-like. So it's very, if you use like Debian systems before, you'll feel right at home using Tails OS.
Cool. Okay, so that's an easy transition for people that
Yes.
are used to using Kali Linux or maybe just Ubuntu.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's taking a little bit to get booted up.
So also, I was going to ask, are there any customizations to the virtual machine settings to make it not super slow or optimize it in general, or is it just you can use the default options?
As far as I know, like it's you can use the default options. You're gonna at least want to give it 1 GB of your own computer's RAM to run, and there is special configurations because you're gonna run it from. You have to go to the settings when you're configuring it, because normally when you're configuring a virtual machine in VirtualBox, you're gonna select the image right away. But for Tails, you just go to settings, storage, and then select the controller IDE right here. And I just selected the .iso file that I downloaded. That's all you have to do to get Tails up and running. Yeah. And
okay, so that's if you're trying to follow along, then provided you have VirtualBox, it should be relatively simple to just get up and running with this.
Yeah, it's very straightforward. Yeah. Just make sure you downloaded the .iso, not the .img. The .img is for booting off of USB.
Okay.
So every time you get greeted to Tails, it's going to say, welcome to Tails, because like I said before, nothing is really saved persistently between uses. So you're going to get this little brief setup page every time asking what language, keyboard layout that you want to use. And then there's also additional settings down here, which can be very important. So say I'm in a country where all Tor traffic is banned, then I'm going to want to set up a Tor bridge. So my first leap is to something that the internet service provider, yeah, exactly, that they trust, and then it'll hop back to Tor, and so my information is relatively secure. So that's only if you're in an area where Tor is being disabled. Also, you can set up, if you go back to additional settings, you can set up MAC address spoofing in case the your router or the network really doesn't like that you're using Tor requests, and then you can use MAC address spoofing and get by that way. So that's like right out of the gate. Super ways to mitigate your traffic being blocked because you're trying to protect it. And then in case you want to do anything as a super user, you're going to have to set up an administration password. So this is so you can actually run software as sudo. So if you, in case you want to install any software packages to your device, you're going to have to set up an administration password. I think even here, it's automatically disabled for additional security, because the password could be compromised, and if someone is able to get that administration password, then they can do whatever you want to your Tails OS device. But so we're not going to worry about that right now. And then we can go ahead and and the unsafe browser. So by default, the only browser you can use is the Tor browser, which is based off Firefox. But a normal version of Firefox is included, but you're not allowed to use it unless you manually change the setting. Yeah. So it
just prevents people who are maybe first-time users from making the mistake, opening the wrong version of Firefox, and then just being tracked like normal.
Yeah, like the way I like to think about it, like when you're using Windows or everything, like all the privacy settings are off by default, but Tails OS it's the other extreme. So all the privacy settings are on by default. Yep.
That's great. Okay, so it's set to max, and you have to disable the ones that start to bother you.
Yes. Yeah. And if you're not exactly, if you notice that none of the internet traffic is going through, I would first try MAC spoofing, and then if you have to, set up a bridge so you can so your internet service provider doesn't see that you're trying to use Tor.
Cool. Okay. All right. So that seems pretty common sense. Like the MAC address spoofing is really handy to have right at the beginning, because if you want to run it as something else, then you have that option, or make it look like a different type of device. And then as soon as it starts up, it just connects to Tor automatically.
Yep. All network traffic is forced to go through Tor. Like you have to try to make traffic not go through a Tor network, which is great.
Wait, sorry. If you go to View on your virtual machine and scale it to 200, could you do that like a hero?
Scale it, scale mode.
Yeah, just
I'll do that. And let me change the resolution.
Cool.
Yeah, so like you can see, if you've used Ubuntu, it looks pretty similar to this, and same thing with Kali Linux. And it comes with, I don't have an administration password, so I can't install any software. But it comes with a pretty good suite. So obviously there's a Tor browser, Focus software. So there's KeePass already installed in case
password manager. Nice.
Password manager. You have Thunderbird, which is a secure SMTP client. And there's also some basic LibreOffice stuff, so you can get some basic work done on the go. And here, let me just, I'm not setting that up right now. I accidentally opened Thunderbird. And let me just change the resolution to something more normal. 16 by 9. Okay, there we go.
Sweet. Oh, also very handy for people who like start up Tails OS and they're like, why is it just a portal in the exact center of my screen? Like, why can I not make it bigger? Just go ahead and scale it and then change the resolution. Easy fix.
Yeah, that's like basic tip for like any software that you want to run through VirtualBox, but especially with Tails OS because you're probably using a lot. And so first thing we can do is actually verify that all this stuff is going through a Tor network. So there's two simple things we can do to check it, and then we'll do a demonstration with Canary Tokens. So you can click this little onion symbol up here, and you can show your onion circuits. And this is just showing all the different circuits that are being used to that your traffic is being sent through. So like this, right now I'm in the United States, but first it's going through France, then Poland, I believe, and ending up in Germany. So if my computer decides to use this Tor circuit, then all my traffic will be spit out in Germany, which and it'll go through like these 3 different European countries first. So it's virtually untraceable unless someone is tracing your entry node.
Yeah. One thing to note also is, well, for one, all of your search results will be in German. And for two, it's really interesting that there are attacks against the Tor network that are widespread. And, you know, if you're really going to dig into this, you should be aware of before you put too much trust in it. Because they're, like, for example, it was found that almost a majority, I think, of Tor nodes were being controlled by the same actor, which gave them a tremendous insight into the Tor network and ability to kind of like monitor traffic coming out of it. So, you know, the network is a really good step towards privacy, and it's better than, you know, like a commercial VPN in a lot of ways, but it also has flaws. So if you really want to get into privacy and stuff, then you should also look up attacks against Tor, because there are some viable ones out there that you should be aware of.
Yep. And if you think about using a VPN, definitely do some research, because the people behind Tails OS do recommend not using a VPN, actually, because a VPN is static. Well, it's a static entry and exit node, while the Tor it changes every time for all your traffic.
So that's handy. So if you're going to the same website over and over and it's logging your traffic, it's not going to give them anything useful.
Yes, exactly, because it's coming from all over the place. And whereas a VPN comes, it's not your router, but it's coming from the same IP address.
So as you mentioned, there's always going to be trade-offs. And one of those trade-offs is there's a lot of websites that are just done with Tor exit nodes. Like, they do not want to serve them. They are not the kind of customers they want to serve. There's no law that says that you have to serve Tor traffic. So they will just drop requests from Tor. Do you know of any websites that react negatively to Tor?
Google.
Oh yeah, look at that.
I was trying to use it. I don't know what this means.
Look at that. It's in German. I would ask Stefan, but, you know, who knows?
Yeah.
But it's very upset.
Let's try to search for Varonis. Let's see if it actually, because, yep, it is not allowing me to use it.
So you're going to see this kind of restriction if you're using this extensively, and you're going to have to basically go to work for Google. You're part-time going to be a like object recognition, machine learning assistant tool. And you're going to have to go through and identify some fire hydrants, maybe some bicycles, maybe some mailboxes before you're able to do search results. Look at this. Nick's got to figure out cars.
Yeah, last time when I was just playing around with Tails on my own, I did all this, and then it still is like, no, you still can't come through. Yeah, see? Oh, there's another car.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, last time I tried it, it still didn't let me through after doing all this AI work for Google.
Yeah, unpaid, I might mention.
Yeah. I'll try this.
So while Nick is over here training the next Terminator, oh, look at that. He's got to do fire hydrants again.
Yeah.
You just did this. You already proved you know it. So like sometimes doing something like running a very simple Google search, if you're going to go with Google, is enough to make you go with Bing or you know, DuckDuckGo. Or
by default,
Nick, what do you use?
By default, Tor is set to use DuckDuckGo, and also it comes with uBlock Origin and Privacy Badger, I believe, for some extra security to block any other tracking links.
That's very useful.
Yeah. So as you can see, if you go to, this is like a useful tip for anybody, but if you go to check.torproject.org, it verifies that the browser is actually using Tor and you're not leaking any data. Or you could still be leaking data, but you are still going through Tor nodes. So this is
right. Now, what are some ways that you might end up leaking data even if you were connected to Tor?
So if you're the only computer on a network that's being monitored that's using Tor, then it can be identified that somebody there is using Tor, and it can be traced back to you that way. So
Yep.
if you're the only computer in an open network using Tor, I would be cautious about that.
Yeah. Also, I would say DNS. If your DNS requests aren't secured, or if they're not going through Tor, then that can also be a problem.
Okay, and then now we can do a canary test or a canary token test to see the difference between what kind of stuff can be tracked when you're using a normal computer using like a standard VPN versus using Tails OS with all those other privacy measures added. So
okay, so if you want to participate, by the way, today, if you're watching us live, I'm going to be in the chat answering questions and stuff. So if you guys want to participate in a little test to see what is recorded when you go to a tracking link like this, then I have donated one of my personal domains that I purchased in order to make this test really, really easy and be able to display kind of just like what a website sees about you when you go to it. So on one side, we're going to have Nick on a Windows computer using a VPN and just generally trying to protect his identity. And then we're going to do it to the extreme and take a look at what is recorded when we use something like Tails that's going to really not give up as much information, hopefully, as happens when Nick just uses his normal machine. So Nick, what is the domain we're going to be using today?
It's hack.gay. So,
that's right. We're using my personal domain, hack.gay. And if you didn't know, you can buy .gay domains, and they're great. So I bought a gaggle of them, and the one we're using today is hack.gay. So if you want to click on a tracking link, and I guess I'll tell you in the chat what we see about you, go ahead and navigate to hack.gay. And yeah, just be aware that we're going to be tracking you as best we can. All right. So we're using Canary Tokens also, which so we had a researcher, I believe it was Adrian from Canary Tokens, come on and show us some really, really cool stuff you can do with this. So yeah, if you want to check out the tool that we're using to stream about Canary Tokens, because yeah, it was awesome. It was really cool.
Yeah. So so first I'm going to go to this web token, which is being routed through by hack.gay. And this is on my normal Windows machine, and I'm using PIA, and I'm connected to Chicago. I'm not going to show you because it'll show my home IP address, but you have to trust me, I'm connected to a Chicago network right now. And I'm going to go to hack.gay, and nothing's really going to happen. I'm going to see this Canary token thing pop up, but it's already too late for me. All my information's already been tracked. And if you are the Canary Tokens manager, you can go to history, and these two were tests, but this was, here we go. And as you can see, it showed exactly where I was, what browser I was using, the version of Firefox I was using, the fact that JavaScript was enabled, Gecko drivers. It showed that it came from Windows and Firefox. And yeah, it showed if it would show that I'm using this. And even if it was using a VPN, it would know what browser I'm using, what version I'm using, so they could try to exploit vulnerabilities that are known about that browser in that version of the browser.
So this is really interesting because there's a lot of information there about whether or not you're using deceptive technology. So for example, it's looking to see if you're using a Tor exit node, and basically if you see that the person is using a Tor exit node, you know not to believe a damn thing about their IP address, and instead you start looking at other clues like the language that the keyboard is set to, the time zone that it's set to. Like all these might be other clues to be able to get one over on someone who's trying to be private but is making some mistakes.
Yep. And then now we're going to go ahead and try it in the Tails OS virtual machine. So theoretically, when I click on the Canary Tokens link, it should show up in the history as coming from Chicago because there's no other reason to. But if we go to hack.gay, and the Canary Tokens will come up again. And I'm going to go back to Windows and look at the incident history. And we got a new hit that is coming from, Germany. And it's coming from this city I'm not going to try to pronounce. And it does recognize that it's a Tor exit node.
Right.
And it did pick up that we're using Linux and Firefox, but it is just another layer of security to avoid being tracked.
I can't really see. Does it have the screen resolution, or the screen
Let's
size?
See if I was able to grab it. It did not look like I was able to grab it actually. So.
Okay, so I wanna try something. Just because I'm curious. There is okay, so if you go back to Canary Tokens, there's also an advanced web bug you can create.
Okay.
So
new token?
Create a new token. And this is also just great for anyone who wants to test their own privacy and stuff. You go down towards the bottom, there should be an advanced bug or a redirect, or a website redirect or something like that.
Cloned website?
And Clone
No.
website.
I don't think that's it. Uh,
Yeah, there's a lot of different bugs. It's like something that allows you to redirect. I think it's like a website redirect or something. But basically what it's doing is it's allowing you to use a little bit of JavaScript. So instead of being limited just by the user agent, we're actually able to do something a little bit extra. I'm going to also look on my own version and see if I can find it. But yeah, so basically, I think that if you're using JavaScript, you have a distinct advantage like on Tails, because not being able to scrape a bunch of information by running like kind of invasive code on your website really like disarms a lot of people who are using tracking stuff that are relying on that sort of just the browser going to it and giving up information about you. And I was going to say in the more advanced version, it actually, I believe, records the screen size. So if you start modifying, so if you, for example, you go to Tails and you start customizing it, that's actually like the opposite of what you should do.
Yeah.
And like,
Yep.
Oh, I see. Okay, so go ahead and Nick, create one that's the slowed redirect. That's the one I'm looking for.
Slowed redirect. Okay.
Yep. And you can set the domain to whatever. It can be like veronis.com. And if you need an email address, then 10-minute mail or something is probably the way to go. But what this basically does is it uses JavaScript instead of just like the simple request to be able to just grab a maximum amount of data. And this is where we might start catching someone who is connecting to Tor, but has the same like GPU and is using the exact same screen size. So like if we have like an interesting setting, for example, where it's carrying over between different cloaks someone's putting on their IP address, then we might still be able to identify someone. And that's really interesting. So you have to select. Oh, yeah, you have to put a domain. I don't know how strict it is about. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Create my Canary token. So this is also a Canary token you can create where it'll take somebody to this link after they click on it, where before it just dead ends to like a kind of sketchy seeming blank website. But Nick, if you go ahead and navigate to this, then you should be able to.
Yep, and it redirects me to Veronis. So unless
it looks like
attention, let's see, and then we can go ahead and manage this token. Look at the history, and
so go ahead and click on the data, and let's see if there's more. Oh, that's complicated. Yeah, it actually looks like there's less.
Yeah, that's strange.
Okay, well, maybe a combination of your browser settings are able to block it enough that it's not running JavaScript or something.
This is in Firefox. I do have like uBlock Origin, and I think I have no script enabled, but I can try it in Edge. I can try that.
Yeah. Oh my God, Edge, perfect. Yeah, because no script will really mess this up. But I guess we'll see. I mean, and this is just a way of kind of gauging how much information companies have about you. So, all right, cool. Veronis.
Here was the newer one.
Wow, that's a lot more information.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because it's using the Chrome.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Wow. So we get a lot more information. Do we get a screen size or any other like keyboard? Oh yeah. So we can see it's set to US English. So even though we might be using a VPN that puts us somewhere else, we're giving up our keyboard settings or our language settings that we're in the United States, even though our IP address might say that we're somewhere else. So this is all stuff that can be used to track you, even if you're using a computer that is a little bit more locked down than the typical one. Yeah. But this is also. Sorry, go on.
This was my fault, because my automatically Firefox, I'm using pretty much the same extensions that automatically come with using the extensions that automatically come with the Tor browser in Tails, and I have all of these installed on Firefox. So basically, if I ran that Canary token through Tails, it would just be in a different location because it is using the Tor browser. But I have scripting disabled on Firefox, but not on Edge, which is why you should install. It's super easy and it's super free to install add-ons on Firefox, and I think Chrome has it too to disable any scripting. So stuff like no script, Privacy Badger, uBlock Origin to block all that garbage from being collected from your web browsing activity.
Yeah. So this is, I think, a good. I mean, unless do you have anything else too weighty to show?
Yeah, I just wanted to show off how the persistent storage. I can't actually use it on the virtual machine, but if you are using it on a USB drive, then everything, my browsing history, my browsing cache, any files that I don't save to a specific volume, then it's going to be erased every time I power off and reboot Tails. So just really quickly, normally you can go to configure persistent volume if it lets me. It's not going to let me right now because it recognizes that it's not a USB device, but then you can set up a password and it's going to give you a file location on that computer where you can save somewhat important documents. I wouldn't recommend having your only copy of that file being on Tails because it is you don't need an admin password in order to delete that persistent volume actually. So just stuff that you want to be able to regularly access, but is not super important.
Private or sensitive, yeah.
Yeah, just anything that makes your daily workflows like a little bit easier. Any files that you want to have regular access to, and that's
yeah. Although I guess if you really had something sensitive, you could probably encrypt it with like some tool on Tails and then drop it into that storage as well.
Yeah. Or if you had like your own encrypted like network attached like storage device that you trusted and that you vetted and you have going through your own VPN, and that would be another way to be able to access data on the go because you could access it through your own personal cloud.
Cool. And again, this is the preferred way of doing it is through a USB device where if you need to store something persistently, you can save it on the USB device, but you're not leaving any trace of it on the computer.
Yeah, because it's all saved to the USB device or used temporarily by the system's RAM.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's most of what we have to go through today. If you're conscious about privacy and you want to make sure that you are taking every step you possibly can while working on something sensitive, Tails is definitely an option you should check out because it's beginner friendly. There's great documentation. It's more secure and resistant template while you're out on the internet, and provided you're not messing around with the settings to make yourself a special snowflake, then you don't need to worry about sticking out as much as other people because most Tails people just leave the settings alone because again, you don't want to stand out too much and are able to be relatively anonymous when they're going on the internet. Although again, there are some convenience issues with not being able to access or use certain websites that really hate Tor traffic.
Yeah, there's no getting around that, and it's just a sacrifice you have to make in order to use the Tor browser.
Yeah, of course you can always use a VPN with Tails, but since that is a static IP address, it kind of defeats the purpose of the operating system. The whole thing is that you're able to spin it up, throw it away if you want to, and maybe even use a piece of hardware that you only have temporary access to. It's a good way to kind of bring your own operating system. And if someone has, like set up an operating system that's compromised or that they have backdoor access to, it makes it a lot less useful if you're running your own operating system and you're just using the computer's RAM.
Yeah, and a surprising amount of public computers don't lock their bootloader, which I think is always, there's library computers. I remember at the school I used to go to, the computer, you could access the bootloader and you could be able to run Tails off of a public computer there.
Yes, I think I had heard stories about this at some school in the past, not locking down their computers. But again, this is like public computers all over the place. If you're able to change the BIOS boot order, then often you can just boot off of a USB. And most of these are either not locked down in the first place, or they use a default pre-programmed code that you can just look up online. So there's lots and lots of places where you can use an operating system like this, including just maybe an old system you have kicking around that isn't really doing anything and could be donating some RAM to your ultra secure operating system.
Exactly.
Yeah, so again, this is great for privacy nuts. It's great for journalists. It's good for security people. It's a really good overall operating system for those who care about privacy and are looking to get into Linux and maybe have worked a little bit with Debian or worked a little bit with Kali. Because it's so similar to both of those, you're going to be able to get started relatively quickly. And I appreciate that Nick has also highlighted the fact that the community is really great. And most of the time, if you have a problem with this, you can reach out to someone there and get some help.
Yeah, so I hope this was able to show you guys an operating system that you didn't know was out there and a way to protect your privacy in case you're looking for extra steps to do so. But like I said, Tails OS is pretty niche and its use case is kind of limited. So there is still useful ways you can protect like a more normal operating system like Windows by using a VPN and by using script blocking software on your web browser. But Tails is like the most extreme use case where you want to lock down everything in case you're in a place where you don't really trust your internet service providers.
Nice. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, when you're at home, things like the Raspberry Pi you mentioned, that's just going to be blocking anything that you don't want connecting in the first place. Like, that's a great option, but not everybody has total control over their network or the network that they're using.
Yep.
So this is a great way of taking the next step in privacy and making sure that, hey, I have as much control as possible over this thing that I'm running.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have today. Nick, if people want to follow you, where would you recommend they do so?
Yeah, you can see my videos on the Null Byte YouTube channel, and you can follow me on Twitter at Nick Gottschall.
Cool. And of course, if you are interested in this content, you can always go to the Security Forward YouTube channel, where we will have a replay of this stream, as well as all of our past ones, including other ones on Canary Tokens, which will probably interest you if you're interested in the kind of stuff your browser might be giving up. And we also have other great free content at Varonis, like the AD PowerShell workshop, which is a great way of getting started using PowerShell to script Active Directory if you're in a position where you're working with a bunch of Active Directory stuff. So yeah, Nick, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully you'll come back again sometime. And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you soon. Bye.